don't hear any drums.
No dancing today. It's music. I'm turning into a musician, so that will be our new thing. Maybe is whether I'm tickling the ivories or playing the drums.
Maybe that should be your new thing after episode 100, as we
Okay.
go to the next thing. So, but yeah, it's a good
maybe, maybe just stay dancing until
dancing until 100, and then after 100, you can come. Why am I egging you on? I don't know why I'm saying things like this.
I think that's great. Need the encouragement. Appreciate that. It's good stuff. How are you this morning, my friend?
Okay. Cold and misty here, but otherwise okay.
Was it? Well, you know
59 degrees and misting. So
how much? What's the temperature?
59.
Oh, 59. Okay. I thought you said 49 at first. I was like, wow, that changed a lot since I was in Santa Barbara earlier in the week. It's pretty similar to that down here in Orange County. It's not drizzly, but supposed to be a nice Mother's Day on Sunday. So I'll look forward to that. Be nice, get out in the sun a little bit and enjoy the day. So anyways, let's dive into our day. I'm Kevin Brown. This is my lifelong friend, business partner, and co-founder of Lead Smart Technologies, Tom Burton. We get together every Friday morning. Well, nearly every Friday morning. If we're not stuck on airplanes, or heaven forbid we get a day off here and there. But we get together each week and we discuss the news going on in the U.S., North America, the Americas, and the world, and kind of take that and look at that, how it impacts wholesale distribution and manufacturing. So in reviewing that, we are reviewing a newsletter that we put out every week. Every Friday morning, we get out to about 10,000 plus people a newsletter. It's called Around the Horn in Wholesale Distribution and Manufacturing. And we take news clippings from all over and we consolidate those into things that are important to distributors and manufacturers. If you don't get that newsletter and you would like to, a couple of simple ways to do that. You can certainly send us a note here on the broadcast. And by the way, if you're with us live this morning on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, send us a note. Let us know where you're from. And hopefully we can see that. We'd love to get a hello and know who's with us. But we get that newsletter out and then we go live on Friday mornings and we review the topics. Tom and I get some feedback. We regularly have guests. We have some great guests coming in the next few weeks. And we try and decipher that and what does that mean to wholesale distribution and manufacturing. So those ways you can get it. Send us a note here. Send us an email to hello@leadsmarttech.com or go to the website for the podcast, which is www.aroundthehornpod.com. And we will get you that newsletter. That list is growing every week. Tom and I both work for a company called Lead Smart Technologies. We couldn't do that this show every week without their support, who sponsors the editors and the producers and the people behind the scenes that make this all come together for us. So LeadSmart is a AI-enabled customer intelligence and CRM platform that allows wholesale distribution or distributors and manufacturers to gain deep insights into their customers, their teams, and their overall organization to help drive better decisions and drive revenues and growth forward at a faster rate than they've ever seen. So if you'd like more information on that, you can certainly reach out to the team at LeadSmart. So, Tom, what did I miss? Did I cover all that?
Good. Let's say good morning to Tyler from Southwest Virginia. Thanks, Tyler, for checking in. Yeah, definitely like to hear from you if you're out and about. And it seemed like the comments came through a little bit better last week, but then I went back and looked after the fact and not all of them came through. So the LinkedIn dilemma continues to move on. But anyway.
Well, very, very good. Let's kind of dive into our newsletter that we cover each week here. And this week's episode, we kind of start and we break this newsletter down into a bunch of different categories, but we start each week with our information about manufacturing and economy and supply chain. Tom, what's our first article there for this week?
You know, yet another one of these wholesalers down 1.3% month to month, up 1.4% year over year. Another one of those confusing statistics that don't really tell us a whole lot.
I've come up with a new conclusion of what we can call all these things, whether we're looking at consumer pricing or the purchasing managers index, whichever one we're looking at. They're the roller coaster in the kiddie ride roller coaster, right? They've got small ups and downs. There's no
Yeah.
big spikes, ups or downs, right?
Yes. Yes.
Kitty Park roller coaster. That's my new thing. So, this did talk about though the fact that wholesaler sales were down 1.3% month to date, but up year over year. So, what does that mean? Maybe it means some simmering. Maybe it means some, maybe a little more caution. We've talked in the last few weeks a little bit about a little bit more cautious. I have to tell you, none of these things I think impacts enough on our bet about interest rates this year. And just for those of you who are with us regularly, you have heard us bantering about Tom's view of only one interest rate cut this year, and I'm at two or more. The bet is for a steak at Chuck's Steakhouse in Santa Barbara. So Tom and I got together earlier in this week to do some business planning in Santa Barbara, and we ate at Chuck's, and the company bought the steaks that night. But
Just
we
just preparing.
we're just getting our palettes ready for who's buying who what when it comes time. So, but we did have a little bit of that discussion. But it does. It's interesting in these reports as they do come through that they give us some good view of kind of where the ups and downs are. Right. So the growth during this period was in automotive category is the one that grew the most, and the decline was in metals and furniture. So then in the places we pay the most attention to, typically with a lot of both lead smart customers and our audience here, they describe it as mixed performance among durable goods, electrical, professional equipment. Those all displayed some moderate growth. So it's interesting as we look at all of that. We'll just have to kind of keep our nose and ears to the grindstone about what's going on out there and what's happening next.
Yep.
So
again, nothing really earth shattering one way or the other.
no, we've got to be paying attention to these things.
Yep,
And then,
sure.
so we kind of go to the next article that was from Reuters, and it talks about U.S. wholesale inventories dropped by 4% in March. That's an interesting thing too, in looking at that article. I think there's a little bit of a misnomer in part of that as we see this. And basically what they're talking about is, a 0.4% inventory decline in March, over the increase that they had in February. But, super minor impact on GDP. The article talks about the declines again in inventories tied to motor vehicles, metals, hardware, papers, some other similar items like that. In the arena of a lot of the folks that our regular commenters and viewers here is petroleum, lumber, machinery, and even computer equipment increased. But I think the balancing act here for me, Tom, as I look at this, the focus here is there's also some right sizing still that's going on as we talk to some of our customers and the wholesale distributors that we work with. Is they went through that pandemic level, many of them, especially when you get into the safety and some of the industrial segments, that they were just getting their hands on everything that they could. Then they got stuck with some inventory based upon the supply chain issues. And now inventories, I think, are doing some right sizing. So I think a little bit of this is part of it is right sizing versus headwinds in the economy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you may be right on that. I think a lot of the right sizing though has been behind us. But what I found interesting about the article, and you may have known this already, but what an impact inventories have on GDP.
Mm-hmm.
And so a little change in inventory, in inventories can have a major impact or a
Right.
significant impact on GDP. And GDP is obviously a key indicator that we look at from an economic growth and an economic situation.
Yep.
So in some ways, I think that's a statistic that we should keep an eye on a bit more as we move forward, because I think it can tell a bit more of a story than maybe I understood. This article really helped me to understand is some of this inventory data, while it may not be a large drop or a large change, could have a significant drag, as they say, on the economic growth.
Yep. Well, and this one talked about it, the economy growing at an annualized rate of 1.6% in the first quarter, the slowest in nearly 2 years. So
Yes. Yeah.
that could tie into Tyler's comment here about who's going to win the stake.
Yeah, so he thought he thought I had it, in the bag, but now he's thinking maybe that you might squeeze something out, but he's seeing industrial MRO market is flattening. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, Tyler, when that second rate raise or second rate reduction comes in this year, I'll raise a glass to you on this as Tom's buying the wine and the steak. So very good. All right, what's next, my friend?
Planning fatigue. Um, I thought this was a very interesting article.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's so let me back up. So basically, the gist of the article is that companies are planning more. They're spending more time planning. They're looking for and trying to plan for some of these, they call them black swan events and situations like bridges collapsing and things like that. What is interesting in reading that is that it's basically saying that a lot of companies though are kind of getting in that, analysis paralysis. And I don't know if over planning is the word, but because they don't really know how to plan, it kind of goes around in circles. And we've see this not so much in these, executive things, but we see this frequently as a lot of over planning.
Mhm.
And I think it's the first time I've heard of that or have heard that of that situation, but I found it quite intriguing as I went through that article.
Yeah. Well, there was some good resource data in here, and it talks about from a this was a survey that had been done. In fact, this was Board International is who did this survey for 2024 global planning. Said 73% of senior supply chain professionals are emphasizing scenario planning due to heightened global risks like the Ukraine war, cost of living crisis, ongoing supply chain disruptions, etc. So they're talking about the things additionally deeper dive into this as far as threats were cyber attacks, labor shortage, fluctuating oil prices, and then again, disruptions and blockages in the supply chain. But to your point, right, and I remember we had one of our guests that was on a while back, Mike Mortensen, was talking about, from Mike's with ARG Industrial in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. And he was talking about, sometimes monthly and weekly review of supply chains versus the quarterly or maybe a couple times a year. There was a really interesting point, though, that really caught my eye in this article. And it said many organizations, 77% was the number, are relying on assumptions instead of data driven scenarios, leading them to focus only on likely risks and not extreme events, or as you said earlier, black swan events. So they're relying on assumptions versus their own data, which just means that's something that they need to be thinking about is, do they even have the data? And if they don't have the data, what should they be doing? What should they be thinking about?
Well, and that's where the planning fatigue and the analysis
Yeah.
paralysis comes from, right? At least if you have some data, you have some objective way of
Yeah. Good
going
point.
about some of the planning versus subjectively putting in opinions or even, and unfortunately, right, even experience may not be a very valuable commodity here because it's a very different situation.
That's a great point, Tom. If you as you think about that, right, is what you think is a very different world. And
Yeah.
probably that could, if you took someone that has been in and around the business for a long, long time, we've got executives on the purchasing and supply chain side, well, all sides of the business, but it's not uncommon to see people, old guys like us that have been around in a company for 30, 40 years. Well, the world is different, right?
Yeah.
And some of these people went through us, focused on manufacturing in the US and watched that migration to China and Southeast Asia. And then now we're starting to watch it come back at the latter parts of their career. But how things work is different. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
remember it. Go ahead.
No, it's interesting about the data part, and I don't want to take this down an AI rabbit hole, but I've been doing a lot of homework
But you
on the,
will.
but I will. A small rabbit hole, maybe a
Okay.
gopher hole. Um, I've been doing quite a bit of homework on the upcoming Chat GP or OpenAI GPT-5, right? So
Hmm.
we're on GPT-4. One of the things that, and supposedly, from what I can tell, it's literally orders of magnitude improvement over what is GPT-4. But one of the things that they're talking a lot about is that the GPT-5 capabilities will be able to analyze and a lot of data and do a lot of planning and strategy type of activities.
Yeah.
So I think, their point there, right? Having that data as these types of capabilities come out, it then opens the door to taking advantage of some of these more robust AI capabilities in the future to really do some real intelligent planning as it goes forward, because that's a lot of where this is heading.
Yep, I think that is absolutely the case. That the reality of what we face today is we've got geopolitical conflicts, major geopolitical conflicts. You've got port issues, but certainly on the East Coast right now, we've talked about a month or so ago the potential of a strike in the Gulf Coast and the East Coast in the ports. Right, we have a continuing tenuous labor situation on the West Coast, though no big threats right now. But then you've got China, Taiwan, you've got all of these things going on, right? And paying attention to exactly what's happening in your supply chain is critical. Tom, we skipped an article that was kind of a lead into this particular article about
Oh,
that, right? Which is the article about U.S. Trade tops 200 billion in the first quarter of 2024 with Mexico. So big trading partner there, always has been, and we need to be paying close attention to that. And the realities of this is we're seeing that growth go more and more and more into that arena. And so we need to kind of be paying attention to that. And there's a couple of great takeaways from this article. And this article spent some time talking about, which of the different ports of entry are the strongest and so forth, and talking about Laredo and Otay Mesa, it's an hour and 15 minutes south of me. Eagle Pass, I know in Eagle Pass is Texas, is where a whole lot of the in the Maquiladora region there's a whole lot of clothing manufacturing going on down there, and that's where a lot of that's coming across. But as these numbers are rising, and we talked about last week an article as well about imports more and more coming in from moving from China, manufacturing moving from China to Mexico. Couple of things I think that my takeaways from this article in the last few weeks are two things. One is we talked about the geopolitical issues of the pressure that I guess it would be tied to, and I'm far from an expert on this stuff, but the pressure tied from China and Taiwan that the U.S. is having some involvement in, and more pressure of U.S. China. If China starts doing more and more in Mexico and Mexico warms up to them, U.S. has got to pay attention to that, because there's a big issue with that, as we talked about on last week's broadcast, excuse me, about trying to get around steel tariffs.
mhm.
That's an issue. But there's another issue that this article talks about that we don't talk about as much. And this has been something that's been paid attention to probably is the ports of entry, right? So if you've got border challenges, which if you've crossed the border into any of these locations, and I'm down in Baja California 3-4 times a year typically, it can take you 3-4 hours to get across the border at some points. So I think and it's not just the border crossings, but as we're watching this, it sounds really great that we're nearshoring all of this manufacturing into Mexico and or Latin America, but is the infrastructure there to really get it across? And I think what we'll probably be talking about, in the coming months is, investments into the infrastructure there.
Yeah, no, it'll get figured out. I agree that probably right now we're not ready for it, or we're not as ready for it as we should be, but that's one of the things that will get sorted out, I think, pretty quickly.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, something to be paying attention to as we're continuing to watch reshoring and nearshoring. So good stuff. So we're jumping into our manufacturing distribution segment that we do every week within our newsletter here. Kind of an interesting article about this gigantic 3D printer. It's an article from Fast Company that says could reinvent manufacturing. I thought it was pretty cool to kind of watch that and some of its capabilities. Any initial takeaways before I dive in a little bit further on this?
Well, I think let's talk a little bit about what it is,
Yeah.
right? So it's a printer, I'm not even sure is the right word for it, but basically it's a big tool that can manufacture. What was the sizes? I don't have them in front of me, but like
96 feet long.
yeah,
32 feet wide and 18 feet high. And I think, if I can dive in for just a second before you continue, is I think most of us think we've seen a 3D printer in a YouTube video, or maybe we've even seen one of friends. I have a couple friends that have them, and they're boxes that are 24 by 24 by 30 inches high with a little reel of plastic on the side that's getting melted and forms something, right? This is very different. 96
Yeah.
feet long, 32 feet wide, 18 feet high. So go ahead and continue.
No, and so I think it said it could create a 600-foot house in 4 days, basically, by going through that. So this to me is, I don't know, printer doesn't seem like the right word,
Yeah.
but it seems like a very interesting tool. And what I found interesting, and we were talking a little bit about this before, this isn't just about building prototypes.
Right.
This is actually manufacturing, could be parts, it could be, really anything. Um, I don't know what it cost. It wasn't clear in there exactly how much this type of thing costs, but you got to figure maybe expensive now and it will come down in price over time. But this seems like a very different and new way of manufacturing.
Yeah. What I think you're spot on. What my in look for me in looking at that, what it was I was thinking about is, okay, well, do you need a 96-foot long one to do all of these jobs? I think what's interesting for me is how big this is, that you now, once that's proven, and most importantly is, it's not just the reels of different colored. I just was thinking about that. We're working closely with one of our large newer customers, and the project manager, she has one of these in her home office, one of the smaller ones, and prints all kinds of stuff. But we're not just talking about reels on the side of different colored plastics to make things. There's all different types, right? And I think they're talking about the house is, it using concrete to to
Mhm.
to pour right out of this. But they're talking about reducing carbon footprints with different bio-based materials that are going through it. Without spending half our show on this today, I think for me, what the interesting implications are is that really it talks about an integrated approach where you can think about wiring and plumbing systems rather than just a specific structure or product. What does that mean? You've got, back to our article earlier about all the manufacturing in Mexico. I used to do some work, some interim executive work with an electronics manufacturing company in San Diego that had a big presence in Mexico. And they had a plant in Mexico as well as the US where they built wiring harnesses. All they did, and it's the stuff that the cable and the satellite companies use. Well, if you look at all of the auto manufacturing in Mexico, such a big part of that is wiring harnesses going through your car. Think about, we've probably all seen pictures of a Boeing plant, and, behind what we see in an airliner, as a plastic, housing between that plastic that you see in the fuselage and the main structure of the airline is nothing but wiring harnesses. And you know what? Machines, especially machines that have quality assurance components with that are AI driven in them, are going to make far fewer mistakes. And when you look at a plane that probably has miles of wiring in it, those harnesses could now be potentially built by a machine of this type. So I
Mhm.
think that, back to your comment earlier about AI can drop in almost all of our conversations today, is now you're starting to see quicker, more efficient. AI is helping the quality on all of that. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and so I have a question for you. Does this, what as it relates to wholesale distribution, does this open the door for distributors to kind of move into this world of manufacturing and build
Yeah.
private label products or things like that? I mean, what does this do? It certainly seems to remove some of the barriers that would traditionally exist with manufacturing complex equipment.
Insightful question. So one guy's opinion, but I've been in this market for 30 plus years. Here's what I think you could see, and I think what you should see is how I'll answer your question. I think what you could see is a lot of distributors that start saying, "Hey, you know what? For a $500,000 or $1.25 million, I can start making this component that we sell so much of. I can lease the building next door and start doing that myself." And I could see somebody going down a path of that, of trying to do more and more of that, and then losing sight of what their role in the supply chain and the marketplace is. What I think people should be doing in that setting, though, is much more likely tied to, and we had a distributor I referenced earlier, Mike Mortensen was on, and a lot of folks in the both in the low voltage electrical world, high voltage electrical world from a distribution standpoint. And then when you talk about hose and fitting distributors and so forth, they typically will take, this manufacturer A, manufacturer B, manufacturer C's products, configure them together into bundles or packages. I can see some of that happening where maybe it's like the only thing I buy from this manufacturer is this component to go into a bundle. Boy, I could eliminate that. And it's something that we do day in and day out, but it's why not eliminate a vendor if I could,
Yeah,
right?
makes sense. Yeah,
But getting too wrapped up in it, I can see people chasing a shiny object,
sure,
and
sure.
it's not good
And
for the,
obviously it's early, right? And I'm sure there's flaws in it and it doesn't work exactly the way I think
yeah,
they even said it's a 1.0 version,
yeah,
but obviously it's just going to keep getting better.
that's exactly right. And I think this might be a great use case in that setting. So before we leave this segment, we have another article here in, by the way, this might be a good time to interject. I'll do it a few minutes earlier than last week. I did it quite late. Is if you're listening to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever your favorite format is, what you're not seeing is that Tom and I are live. And when we record this, it's 9:27 Pacific time on May 10th, 2024. We have an editor and we have a producer that takes all of the data that we've put together today to put this onto the podcast. And what we're doing, though, is we're reviewing live up on our screen is a newsletter that we publish every week. It's called Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution and Manufacturing. We consolidate a lot of the news from around the world about the economy and M&A and sales and marketing and AI and technology and 3D printers and people and leadership. And we talk about that in this format each week. So if you don't get that newsletter and you'd like to, send us an email at hello@leadsmarttech.com. You can go on to the website for our show, which is aroundthehornpod.com, www.aroundthehornpod.com. And you can sign up for the newsletter there. And we'd love to have you with the thousands of others that get that newsletter. So diving into this kind of our last topic here before we get into e-commerce and marketing. And this ties into our supply chain issues, manufacturing, and quite a few things here is talks about Milwaukee Tool had some work gloves seized by the government, and they were doing that because it was tied to forced labor from prisoners in a Chinese jail that were making their gloves, it turned out. So did we publish this to slam on Milwaukee? Nope. Because that could say DeWalt, it could say Diamond Dam, it could say Tom and Kevin's gloves, it could say anything that people go out and private label. You've got these types of risks that go with that.
Yep. And
So
it's just another form of, again, potential disruption and understanding your suppliers and understanding the supply
yeah,
chain. I don't know how you would, I don't know necessarily how they would know all of this until after the fact, but I guess if they had some idea of, how they were operating, possibly, but not sure.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. You've got, and I won't name them, but you've got organizations, some of the publicly traded folks in the industrial distribution world. They've got hundreds of people that are in offices in China that are working on and trying to manage, and these are distributors, they're private label relationships there. And I think one of the challenges comes in, and I'll just use this, the article talks about um, the company involved with this is called Shanghai Select Safety Products Company. Okay. So you and I want to get in the private label glove business in this case. So we go to check with a handful of other people that we know, maybe through one of our buying groups or trade association. We know other people that are private labeling gloves or safety glasses or boots or whatever it might be, right? And you say, yeah, Shanghai Select Safety Products Company Limited. We've worked with them, and you go over and you meet with them, and you tour the factory and so forth. Common thing. But here's what the caveat is. It says the name of the company in the article, and it said, and two of its subsidiaries. And what you don't know about when you go visit with that supplier is his cousin has these two factories, and they do business for the last 20 years with these other factories. You might not even know about them unless you do a deep dive. And we were talking about that earlier, about that article about fatigue and managing supply chain. Is you've got to dig deep on these things, right? And that's the case, especially when we start talking about issues with human rights and so forth. It's one thing is, did they falsify their certification from a government organization here in the US that they say they have. There's all kinds of implications that can come with this, especially when you start dealing with safety issues.
Sure.
If it could be something that could cause a plane to fall out of the sky, or something to not protect somebody's eyes properly, or whatever it is. So supply chain management, maybe that's a great career for young ones to get into, because understanding this is a big deal.
AI will take care of it. All right, let's move on.
AI, the answer to everything. What do you want for lunch? I don't know. Let me ask ChatGPT.
It's funny you say that. One of the biggest use cases right now with ChatGPT and ChatGPT-4 is to brainstorm. People are using it to brainstorm is innocuous things as what should I have for dinner or have for lunch, or what should I do with my job, or what should I do with a relationship. It's one of the biggest use cases, which I find very interesting.
All right.
Let's move on. I'm going to digress. So,
well, you're going to get to talk about AI more in the next upcoming articles. We're going to move into our e-commerce and marketing segment. Interesting article here from Yahoo Finance. 76% of marketers expect budget growth in 2024. What are they going to do with the budgets, Tom?
Well, they're not expecting large budget growth. So I think marketing budgets got cut a lot the last couple of years. That's obvious, unfortunately, one of the places that tends to get cut first. But they're definitely looking at investing more, guess what, in data, and getting more data, and using data more in the marketing front, which I think is good and bad. In the marketing world, and having owned a marketing agency, it's very easy to skew data to what you want it to be. So the key in the marketing world, and I'm sure this is true in other areas, but it is true in other areas, but in the marketing area, really making sure that you're looking at the relevant data, and the data that you're not using it just to make yourself look good based around, a vanity metric that you want to show from a marketing perspective. But anyway, that's not really the point of this article. The point of this article is budgets are increasing and more emphasis is going on data, which is great. Now it's just a matter of the quality of the data and how that data is actually used to actually drive sales and drive growth, versus proving, hey, look at me, I'm a great marketer.
So top priorities and challenges that they talked about: 66% of marketers identified improving data quality as the primary focus, with 60% of those respondents saying it's their biggest challenge. Then they looked at balancing authenticity and using AI, and we're going to talk about that a little bit further in the next article as well. But it says balancing AI usage with brand authenticity is crucial. The print and design and marketing whiz that allows me to continue to live in our home for the last 20 years. My lovely, wonderful wife. We were just talking about this the other day about, all of the content you're starting to see. And I think this is just the cycle, right, that we're going to be going through. But the content that we're starting to see on LinkedIn and other formats that is just so clearly all AI driven. And I'm the big proponent of consistently about using AI as that help get rid of writer's block, and or struggling to get something started. But man, you're seeing just this cut and paste stuff continuously, and it's, I think what it's done is made people write much longer content as well. And the next article we're going to talk about is about content, and it just astounds me. And then I didn't realize this, because and maybe that's a good thing, because I've only used ChatGPT and some of the other tools enough, and Gemini and so forth, for outlines versus writing things for me. But I didn't realize this, but Darlene was mentioning this to me the other day, is that, some of it, even Chat GPT and some of these other tools, they'll drop the emojis or icons right into it as well. And that's, people are copying and pasting
Yeah.
just all of
Yeah.
that together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, ooh, not a good look necessarily.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's just lazy marketing, right? That's just
yeah. Yep.
lazy stuff. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes, but
Yep.
um,
Well, let me hit a couple of the last things that it talked about in this article, but kind of tied to implications of it. So, data quality, personalization strategy is important. So, we really understand what our messaging is to what audiences. AI and authenticity, we just finished talking about that. Generational training, so training to support across generations that will build more cohesive strategies, right? So, if you have a 50-year-old and a 20-year-old working in their own silos, you're going to end up struggling. If they're collaborating, it's going to be better. And then a drive for innovation. So innovative tactics. They talked about exploring new technologies to differentiate their marketing. So I thought that was a good article.
yeah, and just one last point before you related to data,
Mhm.
because I spend my life working with our customers and their data. What we're finding is that quote unquote sales data, order data, potentially even invoice quote data, things like that. There's a lot of good data there to actually drive marketing. So a lot
Mhm.
of times marketing data is thought of, well, who's on my website or who's reading my emails or who's reading my content, and yet that or who's engaging with my Google ads or whatever. Well, that's is data that can be rated for marketing. There's a tremendous amount of data, especially in our industry, that can come from your sales and your financial transactional data that can also, we're finding, drive a lot of good marketing decisions and marketing actions. So something to keep in mind. I'd like to do a deeper dive on that at some point, because they're not separated, right? It's like
Yeah.
marketing. What is marketing's job is to create more demand and to build your brand. There's a lot of data that can be utilized from the sales side of the fence that can help facilitate that. So
It's great. Good stuff. So next article, thought leadership is on trend, but few can pull it off.
well, I think that's exactly what we were, in some ways, what we're just talking about. So
Mhm.
first of all, I thought this first point, an overwhelming majority, 9 in 10 decision makers or C-suite executives are moderately or very likely to be more receptive to sales and marketing outreach from a company that produces high quality,
Mhm.
under high quality
High
thought
quality.
leadership. Right. Right. So, and the reason is because if you have already had a, if you are already exposed to the thought leadership, you're starting to build trust in the company that you're working with. You're starting to get to know them, and you may even have some interest or demand, or if nothing else, some intrigue in what they're doing. So you're definitely getting a head start. But as we know, as you just said, though, thought leadership is not going to Chat GPT and say, write me an article about blah,
Right.
and copy and pasting it and putting on there. So thought leadership to me is now, it's always been about quality, but because the quantity has increased so much, the importance of the quality to rise above that noise is even higher. And that's really what this article is talking about.
That's great. Very good. Solid stuff there. I liked it. In fact, I was appreciative. Lindsay Young with Three Aspens Media, who's been on the show before and will be on again soon with us. She actually wrote some notes about this article on LinkedIn this morning that she pulled from our newsletter. So appreciative of her doing that. I think this is there's such an opportunity for brands to become thought leaders. And, I think about it with us at Lead Smart is we do an okay job. There's so much more that could be done. But
Mhm.
there is, one of the highlights that I looked at this is it talked about the rise of low quality AI content that creates opportunities for people to be authentic with high quality thought leadership and ability to stand out, right? And there is, when you look at platforms, whether it's video content on TikTok, or it's Instagram posts, or it's more deeper content that you're putting out on X/Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever the platform that you use is, and there's going to be more and more platforms coming out regularly, is that authenticity. And I think people can see quickly through, I had an agency do something for me, or it's just true thought leadership. And then even so, this gets even more powerful. And I know, one of the podcasts, and I can't remember. Tom, what's Chris Walker's podcast title?
Revenue Vitals.
Revenue Vitals. Great podcast. If you're well, and I'm going to suggest this is a great podcast for executives to listen to, because so often as executives, and I've lived this my whole career, is we watch 20-year sales veterans all of a sudden get the title, director of sales and marketing or VP of sales and marketing, but their focus is on sales because that's what they know. And then there's this marketing component, and marketing might be 3 social media posts a week and a blog post on the website once a month, and they publish the blog post on their website, and that's their marketing department, and then they take care of trade shows and catalogs. Right? That is probably the standard across the board in wholesale distribution. But when we can start having executives understanding the opportunities for authentic content development and thought leadership across social channels and across your marketing message, that includes the senior executives in an organization. It includes a CEO that is consistently on, and it doesn't matter the size of the organization. You could be a 5-person organization and your CEO has a relevant presence on social media, or you could be a Fortune 100 company. But if your leadership understands this authentic opportunity that we have to develop thought leadership, it can change the perception of brands at your customer level.
Sure, but it has to be done with high quality and authenticity, and you have to reuse it to rise above the noise. And otherwise, you're just adding more to the noise, which is kind of the key thing of the article here. But anyway.
Yep. I think this must be, we're seeing this on our screen that says it resonated with me so much. Great content. I think that might be Lindsay that popped that in there. It's just, we're not seeing who that is, but that's my assumption. And I can see this on my other device. That was Lindsay commenting on that. In fact, Tom, Mitch, pop that up there about that other comment. Google is now deprioritizing largely AI non-differentiated content as well. So there are a lot of reasons to invest in better, higher quality original content. Lindsay, any possibility you can help people do that? I thought so. Lindsay's company does a great job working with a lot of great brands with that 3 Aspens media. So good stuff. Let's kind of jump on. We're going to actually, there's a few pieces related to this that we're going to talk about, as well as we talked about that AI piece as we get into technology and cybersecurity. But another article that we talked about and covered here this week was an article from Digital Commerce 360. Granger eyes more repeat customers at Zorro.com. Tom, I want to, if you don't mind, I want to move on through on that pretty quick, because there's some big stuff ahead of us. But the key piece of that takeaway for me was, and again, that's Granger, and Zorro has become kind of their endless aisles, I think, is one of the terms that they use with that as well. Is that they, you can put anything online for sale, right? This just talks about some of Zorro's growth, but the idea they're talking about a lot here is being really good at acquiring new customers, but then getting them to repeat shop. So I'm going to flip-flop this for the traditional typical distributor, because the typical distributor, and it doesn't matter if you distribute pool chemicals, hard hats, or pipe valves and fittings. We're all really good at our field sales and branch counter sales. And we do a pretty good job typically of repeat sales, but we miss typically 2 components. One is expanding wallet share, which is one of the big tools that we do within Lead Smart Channel Cloud. Our technology tool that our company does is help get visualize what categories are we selling to our customer and which ones should we miss that typically, but then we're also doing very little online currently. So this article talks about all Granger's doing online, and I see this transitioning when looking at it from a smaller regional or independently owned wholesale distributors saying, hey, I work really well with my existing customers in getting them to buy more. Now I need to flip that over onto my website and even now cross sell, do all of that we talk about regularly about
Yeah.
what we can do in that setting. So good article there. All right, where are we going next? Technology, cybersecurity, and AI, which leads us back to AI, topic we talk about quite a bit here. Tom, this article is about OpenAI CEO Sam Altman weighs in on content authentication, and I think that ties a little bit to our previous article there about authentic
Well,
content.
it's a little bit. Basically what, this issue is about is, did you actually create the content,
Mhm.
right? Quote unquote. Are you the copyright owner of whatever it is that you're talking about? And what he's talking about here in this article is that rather than using AI to spot non-authenticated content, how do you use AI to actually basically tag and have certainty on where that content is coming
Mhm.
from, whether that's through digital signatures. This is, I think, where the blockchain will really, really start to
Oh,
actually
okay.
come to life, right?
Hmm.
Because the blockchain is all about using that types of things to have that basically that something that can never be changed or go away.
Right.
So it allowed you to use those digital signatures in a way. He didn't get into that there, but I believe that's a big use of where the blockchain will fit in. But yeah, he's really, and obviously it's an issue, right? Is that how do you tag, if you want to call it that, or sign or whatever, that your content is actually authentic
Hmm.
and be able to then let others know that versus, content that's not authentic and generated through the AI process.
Well, there's a couple pieces. Thanks for that recap there. I think there's a couple pieces that go with that as well. Tom is they tie in this article, and I think you've got a lot of this push from the current administration wanting to make sure that things are going to be safe and fair in the election. So we've got a lot about that. Is this real content from this candidate, perhaps? But I think what's interesting in your comment about the blockchain tying to this as well is intriguing to me, because I think what comes out of that additionally is the issue with brand integrity in general, right? I mean, manufacturers are working every day with the e-commerce data that's out there about their products and who's selling their product on Amazon or eBay or reselling their products. And I think this kind of almost goes full circle in that setting is what kind of tools can we have here to authenticate managing my brand, not just a statement or a piece of content.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah,
No,
good.
I think, I mean, the whole idea of blockchain is immutability, which means that it's it can't easily be changed or updated or altered. So I think anyway, we'll see, but I think that's going to become a big part of it.
Good. Well, I think that'll be interesting. We'll continue to watch that as we do here. So let's dive into our sales and M&A segment. I'm sorry, we missed an article there about security. My apologies, I went too fast there. This is from Tech Target as well. IBM study shows security for Gen AI projects as an afterthought. Maybe a recap on that. Do you have any thoughts on that? And then I'll share a couple of quick ones.
No, I mean, I think the byline here is pretty much tells the story, right? 82% say trustworthy is important and with AI, but only 24% have done anything about it, mainly because it's hard, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's not there's not an easy answer for this at this point. So
Well, it's hard.
uh,
It's hard when you try. If you
yeah,
don't understand even the importance of it, it's even
right,
harder, right?
right,
And I,
right.
I think there's an awareness factor of, and I would look at this. I think, hadn't even thought of this. Is and we even in our organization is having some policies. Is what tools are we allowed to use, right? And I use that example, a couple of times in the past when we've talked about this is, I do a lot of volunteer work with faith-based volunteer work. And in my local congregation, I've got some responsibilities about the safety of the facility and security measures and things like that. And I had 2 documents I'd been given to review, and I thought about asking ChatGPT to do the comparison. And I stopped and thought, it's like, and this was using free version of ChatGPT 3, I think it was. It's like, wait a minute, I have the risk here if I load both of those in that I just put out to the world if someone else wanted to search if these documents were out there. So there's just all kinds of risks, right, that we want to be thinking about and avoiding. And I guess probably maybe the biggest takeaway and factor is becoming aware of the security issues that go with it. And when you're aware of those, then you can go do the heavy lifting to make sure you're
Yeah,
safe.
and there's definitely some frameworks and other things that are starting to come out on this. So it'll get better, or you'll get
Mhm.
more relevant, being able to do some of this. But yeah, it's not an area that's really been given a whole lot of attention relative to everything else.
Great. Hey, two cool articles in our sales and M&A section here. The first one, which I really enjoyed, was Brian Gardner's article. Brian and I just met recently, and Brian is the founder of Sales Process 360. He wrote a book called ROI from CRM, and it's that finished its title there. Give him the plug he deserves here. ROI from CRM. It's about sales process, not just technology. And he wrote a really good article about who is your CEO for CRM. This is available at the Distribution Strategy Group's website. He did this in conjunction with that team. I thought this was a really solid article.
Oh, it's a great article, and there's a lot. I don't want to recap it. I think you're better served to take a look at the article and really talk about what it means to be a CEO of your CRM. But what it means is that, somebody in the organization, right, has to be the steward of getting what can be gotten out of the CRM.
Right.
What I find interesting, and we see this every day, right? Let's face it, a lot of companies, we see it, think CRM is a 4-letter word
Mhm.
because of a lot of, kind of the old school definition of CRM, right? Which is Big Brother, and all we're going to do is add extra work and blah, blah, blah. But I look at the value that I see our customers getting in this sort of this next generation of CRM, and the sales growth that they're getting, and the value and the enablement that's occurring with their sales team, and the insights that's there, right, is so massive that this idea of the steward of the CRM, almost like you could have a chief CRM officer in the
Mhm.
organization. And I know that's not the best word, but it's really, there's so much value to be gained out of it. We do a lot from the vendor perspective, but within the organization, having somebody that can continue to facilitate that value is really, really, I think, something we're going to see more and more of as CRM, as people start to understand this next generation of CRM is not the generation of CRM of Big Brother and extra work and
Right.
whatever they call it, CRM Saturdays or whatever it was, so
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
people were entering those. And unfortunately, I wish there was a better term for it, right? I wish there was a new term, but there's not. But anyway, the point is in this article is how do you actually get the mileage out of it? And I thought it was some really, really good advice.
That CRM Saturdays, we got to I've said it a number of times. I heard that from Joyce Lansdale from Vallon, is who shared that's not what she wanted her team doing, but had been exposed to that in the past. But I think you're right. So a couple of statistics out of this. Brian talks here about 80% through a survey of business leaders were unsatisfied with the performance of their CRM system, right? And we see and hear that all the time from companies who have had a tool in the past, and so much of it is because one, how they viewed it, right, and it was Big Brother versus being a tool where you could truly show your employees that, what is that old term, the world's favorite radio station is WIIFM, what's in it for me, and right, not showing that, and it's a Big Brother tool and so forth. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And then poor onboarding, which we know is critical, right? And when you're doing CRM right and you're giving more data to the salespeople, and not just salespeople, but to your organization, than you're asking in return, you're going to have a great onboarding and a great adoption experience. This was talking about another research study that had been done that talked about effective onboarding will increase retention by 82%. Bamboo HR says if you have a good program, training programs, employees are 18 times more committed to your company as well. So, man, that's a lot of
Yeah.
data there that can help.
Well, and the one thing that I think the article did miss is they didn't really talk about the functionality or capability of CRM in today's world. Today's world of CRM, speaking from our perspective,
Mhm.
is all about driving sales and driving growth and driving a better customer experience. It has very little to do with tracking activity or being Big Brother,
Mhm.
right? So no matter what you do, if you're trying to onboard an organization around, hey, you need to track activity and we're going to monitor that, that's a hard road.
Yeah.
But if you're onboarding an organization based around, hey, you're going to put more money in your pocket, you're going to have happier customers, you're going to grow the business, you're going to, whatever the case, drive sales, that's a very different story and a very different onboarding, quote unquote, approach,
Right.
because the adoption will go there. I think inherently he was implying some of that, but it just didn't call it out exactly in the article.
Yeah, no, that's good. And if you're interested in these types of things, reach out and follow Brian on LinkedIn as well. There are, though, before we go on, Tom, there are a couple of bullet points that were worth talking about that he mentioned here, as he talks about a CEO for CRM. Call it whatever you want. Call it a project leader. Call it whatever it might be within your organization. But the idea behind that is, and he has a list of 8 or 9 of these, I think, but one of the most important things is that somebody believes in the value of a properly implemented platform, right? It's getting that buy-in by the person that's leading the project that's not just been assigned something, but they see it and they understand it, right? They talk about being somebody respected in the organization with the power to make changes, right? Within an organization. I think that's great. Then he talks about understanding how sales, product specialists, marketing, service department, management, and so forth all coexist using the technology, right? Skipping if over a few of them, says has the bandwidth to spend the time needed for success. I hear this from you and your team all the time of implementing with our customers is we could have them done 3 months earlier if they would have blocked the time and laid things out correctly, right? Is IT savvy but does not have to be an expert, and then understands clearly about how the CRM platform will work with other information systems. So good article. We should probably get Brian on the show one of these days and have some further discussions. But I enjoy that one a lot. So moving on, we covered an article in here. We're in our sales and M&A segment, but we covered an article a few weeks ago about Home Depot's acquisition of SRS, a company, and this article is also from the Distribution Strategy Group. There's quite a few comments in here from Ian Heller. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Don Davis. I thought this was a really insightful article if you're in the wholesale distribution space about the depth and what's going on with this acquisition that we saw. So SRS Distribution, Texas-based company, uh, mostly roofing, entered into landscape and pool supplies and so forth. A number of years ago, they've done 107 acquisitions within their organization at SRS, about 10 billion in revenues, 750 branches and warehouses in 47 states, 2,500 sales reps, and 4,000 trucks. And Home Depot bought them. You think there might be an issue or a potential threat there? I think there is a risk of that. And this article, I think, does a really nice job of giving a view over Walmart, Amazon, Lowe's, and Home Depot are the key ones that it mentions in here. I thought it was really valuable. And it quotes, the article quotes Ian Heller, who's a good friend of our shows and a good friend personally as well. And he made the comment, he says, contrary to analysts' assumption, all of these retail-based companies can earn higher margins in certain sectors of distribution they can in the retail markets. But the other issue that they face is if they want to grow and move into other segments into their own industry, specifically retail, they've got a huge risk because of how aggressive the current Federal Trade Commission is. And Ian quotes here about, Lena Khan, who we've talked about, I don't know, 5, 6 times over the past year, of what she's doing at the FTC to block big deals. So if you're a retailer and you want to expand in retail, you've got to fight a tight and rigid FTC right now. Why wouldn't you take the deep pockets that you have and go into new markets and new segments where you could be successful?
Yeah, no, it gives them an opportunity to be under the radar, do under the radar acquisitions
Yep.
of, quote unquote, not that these are small businesses, but they're not mega businesses, and they're going to pass through the process. So, you see that even in the tech industry right now, is that more and more M&A actions are under the radar, not these big mega mergers.
Right.
And that's what they're saying here. And I agree also that they said there's a lot of money to be made in this space, and these big public companies have to keep showing earnings growth. They have to keep
Right.
showing growth, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of incentive for them to do some of this, and I'm sure a lot of eyes are on this acquisition, the SRS one, from these other players, to see how it goes, and if it goes well, then it will be probably accelerating.
Well, and you're right, spot on, right. And a lot of this was tied to, the cash that these companies have and access to cash. They have the resources, they have the teams, they have the people. So when you look at Lowe's, Walmart, Walmart in 2022 instituted their Walmart business, which was just a response to Amazon business. But we talk all the time about the growth of Amazon business. It's pretty astounding, of what can be here. So it's something that we'll continue to watch. I thought this was a very well written article. Two great articles that we
Yep.
focused on today from Distribution Strategy Group and some of the writers that they work. So good stuff. We have a people and leadership segment each week that we go to as well. There's 2 articles there. Oh, before we finish with that, in our sales and M&A, there's an article there about affiliated distributors, one of our great partners that we work closely with as a preferred service provider from LeadSmart. They hit record sales in the first 3 months of 24 of $19.5 billion, almost $20 billion for sales across their members. So exciting. That's a 7% increase over their 14 divisions that are in 3 different countries. So that's good news. But as we jump into kind of winding down today in sales and leadership, there's an article here that from CNBC talks about job growth, less than expected, and a little bit of a rise in unemployment. And then there's a cool article there from manufacturingdive.com, and it talks about a second chance hiring can bridge manufacturing labor costs. And it's interesting because within that article, it talks about hiring former inmates or former prison people with prison records and so forth, and helping them to get into having programs to help them get back into the job force. And when we talk to wholesale distributors and manufacturers every day, one of their biggest challenges is employee retention and finding people. And maybe there's a balancing act that can go through some of these programs that reduce recidivism, or people committing additional crimes by having a life-changing impact. So kind of a cool feel good article there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That'd be an interesting one to get a take from Dirk Beveridge on. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see the pros and cons of that and what are the risks of that and so
Mhm.
forth. But if it can work, then it could be a way to fill that gap a bit that is obviously quite substantial.
Very good. All right. Well, kind of winding out of this today. Each week we have a segment called Industry Scuttlebutt that's in the newsletter. Again, we're here live. If you're not with us, if you're listening to the podcast later in the day and not with us live, we're looking at a newsletter that we publish each week called Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution. If you'd like to get that, just reach out to us. But talks about a great acquisition that Rexel just did by acquiring Tally. Good article there about the follow-up. That's from TED Magazine, the Electrical Distributor Magazine. You can catch that one there. Blackhawk Industrial acquired a factory tooling outlet in Texas. Blackhawk is pretty consistent in their acquisitions. But the last thing we'll mention on this arena today in the industry scuttlebutt is that the Industrial Supply Association, ISA, I was at their event in Charlotte last month and got another event coming this fall. And they've had a tool called their Top Line Pulse, which is a modeling and data analyst and forecasting tool. They relaunched it. If you're a wholesale distributor, go take a look at it's isapartners.org and go look at the Industrial Supply Association's tools. Really kind of a cool tool that they launched and talked about. Brendan Breen and his team's growing. They're doing some really neat stuff to reinvent ISA. So I guess this is not your father's ISA anymore. So that's kind of it for us for our articles and so forth. We had our good reads there. You can check in that on our newsletter as well. But any closing thoughts on our articles or the week, Tom?
No, that was quite a wide variety today.
Yeah,
So,
we covered a lot of ground, didn't we?
yeah, a lot of ground. And thanks for the comments and for the things. And yeah, we do have some good guests coming up, I think, over the next few weeks. So you're not going to just have to put up with you and I for
No,
the
we've got
next few weeks.
what I'm pretty excited about is we have the CEO of the National Association of Wholesalers on at the end of the month, and quite a few other guests lined up. We've got Jonathan Bine coming on shortly from Distribution Strategy Group as well. We'll spend some time talking about Distribution Strategy Group's big AI conference that they have coming up in June as well. So a lot of good stuff. And we have, I think between now and the end of June, I think we have 4 or 5 great guests coming, and then we're starting to stack up our guests for the rest of the year as well. So if you have suggestions about what maybe we should be talking about each week outside of what we already do, suggestions for a great guest, we would love to hear about that. The other side of it is if you have any suggestions about how we do this or how we can make this better. We do this for wholesale distributors and manufacturers and the hardworking millions of people that are involved in that marketplace. So keep us posted if you see anything there. So Tom, anything exciting for the weekend planned?
Nothing too exciting. No.
No. Okay, good. We'll stay at your desk, write some
Yep.
code, learn
Yep.
learn more about AI, and go from there. So Kevin Brown, Tom Burton, thanks to our sponsors at Lead Smart Technologies, the company that Tom and I both work for. We will wish you all a great weekend. Enjoy some time with your mothers if that's what you have planned. And we'll ask you to be kind, be safe, and do good things. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, everyone.